You're listening to
Catholic Sprouts,
the daily podcast for Catholic kids that strives to plant seeds of faith. Hey there, Sprouts. Today is Wednesday, October 3rd. This week on the Catholic Sprouts podcast, we are talking about trust. On Monday, we looked at the profound example of trust that is our friend Saint Therese. Yesterday, on the Feast of the Guardian Angels, we reminded ourselves that God is always with us and He knows us inside and out. Today, we are going to talk about another important concept in the journey to trusting God, and that is that God really does want what is best for us. In fact, He wants what is best for us, and He knows what is best for us, oftentimes much better than we know for ourselves. Now, the best example of this comes from way back in the Old Testament. At the very beginning, God created the world, and into that world, He created a man in His image, Adam. Soon He created Eve, who was also in His image, and the two would live together as companions in complete happiness in the Garden of Eden. At this point, original sin had not yet entered the world, so these two lived without sin, completely trusting the Lord for everything. And as you might know, God had only one rule for them in the garden. They could eat anything they wanted, except for from one tree. God said, "Do not eat from this tree." And that doesn't seem like that big of a request, does it? But we all know how this story goes. One day, Eve was tempted by Satan. She ended up eating the apple. Adam ate too. They sinned, they lost their trust in God, and they were kicked out of the garden. What's interesting, though, is why Eve would eat that apple. Doesn't it seem crazy that she would do that? God, who had just created the entire world, had one small request. "Just don't eat from this tree," He said. "You live in a beautiful garden that is overflowing with other things to eat. Just eat those things." That doesn't seem like that big of a request, does it? Well, then why did Eve commit this sin? It's because she did not trust that God wanted what was best for her. She thought she knew better, and so she took matters into her own hands. If you look at this story, it's at the very beginning of the Bible, at the beginning of the book of Genesis. You see that Satan tells her not only that this is a good tree to eat from, but that if she eats this apple, she will be like God. Her eyes will be open, she'll be able to see good and evil. And of course, we know that eating the apple did change things. Sin entered the world. But Eve didn't believe that God wanted what was best for her. She believed that, in fact, God was holding things back from her, that He was limiting her. And so she took matters into her own hands. Now, it's very easy to be critical of Eve, to say, well, I wouldn't have eaten the apple. But we all sin every day in small ways that demonstrate that we, too, don't trust God. Now, I want you to realize something. God is worthy of our trust. And He has demonstrated this over and over again. Remember that God did not ask us to love Him first. He loved us first. When God created the world, He created a beautiful garden, the entire world, all of the plants and animals, as a beautiful gift to humanity. And so, Sprouts, with the Garden of Eden and the first sin in mind, I have a challenge for you today. I want you to stop looking at the negative and instead look at the beautiful. Look at the gifts that God has given you, the ways He has loved you in ways that you never could have predicted. And I want you to say this simple prayer: Jesus, I trust in you. It is a powerful prayer from St. Faustina that has the power to transform your heart. So say it today and say it often. Jesus, I trust in you. That's it for Catholic Sprouts today. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, continue to grow in your faith and truly sprout into the beautiful creation that God intended you to be. And finally, a quick note to the grown-ups. First of all, thank you for listening to the Catholic Sprouts podcast. I ask that you please consider sharing this podcast with another Catholic family you know. Send them an email, a text, or simply mention it the next time you see them. Please join me in the mission of helping each Catholic child truly sprout into the wonderful human that God created them to be.